Go full steam ahead on his immigration agenda, with or without Congress's help. Top advisor Stephen Miller was on Capitol Hill this week, urging House Republicans to slash funding for sanctuary cities. One of those cities, Chicago. Well, they just rejected a proposal from two Democrats that would have allowed ICE agents to work with city police to remove migrants with criminal charges. Ray Lopez is one of the Democrat Chicago aldermen who made that proposal. He joins me now. Alderman, what does it say about your fellow Democrats on the city council that they not only shot this down, but overwhelmingly shot this down?
39 out of 50 members of the city council said no to working with the incoming administration, no to working with ICE when we arrest individuals who not only may be arrested or convicted of drugs or gang issues, but people who are human trafficking, people who are involved in prostitution and pimping people who are involved in sex crimes against minors. It's embarrassing. It's outrageous that this is where the Democratic Party has gone to, this extreme of extremes to try to protect criminals. And we've seen this time and time again in Chicago, but this takes us to a whole new low, especially as we see even Congress with our own Democratic senators voting towards the middle, voting and returning towards some sort of semblance of common sense on this matter.
Yeah, Chicago City Council certainly seems like an outlier on this, but their sanctuary policies will remain in place. And they include that police cannot arrest someone solely on immigration status, cannot cooperate with ICE, even if arrestees have those criminal warrants, and cannot support federal immigration enforcement operations. Doesn't this policy, Raymond, invite illegal criminal migrants to basically use Chicago now as a base of operations, all to the detriment of those hardworking men and women who are just trying to get by in the Windy City?
You know, we know that this will definitely encourage individuals who know that they can prey on our sympathies here in the city of Chicago. And look, I believe that we can be welcoming to immigrants. I understand that there are people who we can't always address how they got here, but we can definitely choose how we address them once they get here. And the city of Chicago is saying, no matter how you got here, we will not turn you in no matter what you do. You can kill someone and we're not going to let the feds know. And I don't think that sends the right message in any way, shape, or form. And what I know is this. We've heard time and time again, both from the returning president and from Tom Homan, his borders are, that they want to focus on the criminals. We want to focus on the criminals. There's some commonality there, but I also know that there'd be collateral captures if we continue to tell Trump, well, go find them yourself. If we can help, we should help.
Money talks, Raymond. We have to be cognizant of that fact. So if Stephen Miller and the incoming administration actually succeed in withholding funding from the feds to sanctuary cities, will that change the city council's mind then?
You know, I don't necessarily believe money will motivate my colleagues. You know, they want to fight. They want to foil. They need a boogeyman, and they're content to let the Trump administration be that for them at the expense of Chicagoans, at the expense of our city. You would think that if you're going to put at risk billions of dollars that we get in support from the federal government to the city of Chicago simply for protecting 100 criminals, that you might want to reconsider that logic. But I don't think logic applies to many of my colleagues, particularly those that espouse these pro-criminal mentalities.
And the people that will ultimately suffer in the end are the middle and working class people who make Chicago run. It's so unfortunate what is happening to them, all at the behest of their own city council. Ray Lopez, have a great weekend. Thank you for shedding light on this important topic.
We are honored to have Alderman Ray Lopez on the show, actually for many different reasons.
Our new buddy.
Yeah. So first and foremost, you know, when I used to see him on Fox News a lot, and I'm like, oh wow, you know, this guy's a Democrat, but I like him. And then when I got to spend more time talking to Ray and hearing him and having conversation, I like him even more. And so I'm honored. He reminds me, you know, for those of you who watch all the time, you know, I was raised a Democrat, southwest side of Chicago. That's all I knew, and Dad worked for the city. And he reminds me of the Democrats that my mom and dad, my uncles and family, even though he's a young man. He's the kind of Democrats that used to be back in the day when I was raised. So another thing that I espouse to all the time is, like, now that I'm a Republican,
don't put it in air quotes.
Yeah, no, what I mean, I am. I think I am a Republican because they're a lesser of two evils. Okay, that's why I'm a Republican. But yeah. I criticize the Republicans. They don't have courage to stand up and fight for what they think's right. i.e., like the porn, the drink. They won't even talk about it, even though they don't think it's good for our kids to have that in the school. And I criticize them because they don't have courage. And when I speak, I say, you know what? If I was still a Democrat, nobody would know who Terry Newsom is because there's a million men of courage, right? The Democrats have courage. They have the unions. They have their foot. They're willing to, even if we don't agree with them, they will fight for what they think is right, and that's exactly what Ray's doing. And it's not, he's being pummeled by his own party, and he's still standing up and fighting for the right thing. So I respect him and admire him for doing that and taking the heat for that, to do the right thing. So we're honored to have him here. If you want to get Ray in here.
Yeah, and I would just add that we haven't talked to any Republicans in Illinois that are willing to.
Not a one. Hey,
not
Ray.
one.
Welcome.
Hey, Raymond.
There would never be
Gentlemen, good evening.
There would never be a Republican that was doing the same thing that you're doing in the state of Illinois against his party. Never, ever. So I respect you for that. I respect you for many different ways. So thank you for being on.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, and I would say, on the other side of that coin, we got to commend you because I don't think it's a very regular for somebody on your side of the aisle to reach across and talk to people who on the other side of the
Fox
aisle.
News, that takes courage.
So, let me open with that, Raymond. Can you kind of give us your journey a little bit in the sense of having, what drove you to start speaking out? Was it to start speaking out about this? Was it simply you just advocating for your community? Did you see that this was the right time because, the mandate of November 5th, it's like enough is enough? Walk us through your journey on how you developed the courage to start speaking out on this issue, especially on national platforms like Fox News.
Well, I think, first off, thanks for having me, and I'm always glad to have all of your viewers joining in on the conversation because I think we don't talk enough, right? We always avoid hot topics. Even remotely controversial topics, we just choose to ignore them and we don't encourage discourse anymore. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. And I think what really started me on this path was calling out the gangbangers in my neighborhood years ago, almost a decade ago when I was first elected, because it really starts there. Because seeing something so blatant, so obvious, and so wrong when nobody else would say anything just didn't sit well with me. Mm-hmm. Somebody had to call out the bad guys. And at that time, it was about 2016. Actually, I know exactly what it was. It was Good Friday, 2016. Gangbangers were doing some crazy crap in my neighborhood. And I basically called them urban terrorists on that day. And ever since then, it was just, my own Democratic colleagues telling me, calm down, cool it, chill out, don't want to rock the boat too much. And I basically just said, F that. You have to keep it straight, simple, and truthful and draw a line and stick with it. And I've been that way ever since, going after the gangs, fighting back and forth, taking it to their turf. But I think what really brought me to national prominence was during the civil unrest following George Floyd's murder, when in a Zoom call with my then mayor, Lori Lightfoot, I basically dropped the mother of all F-bombs on her that was heard all around the world because she
I remember
me
that.
of-
Now. I
that.
Now
Yep.
I remember
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
That was you. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
forgot.
That was me. I was law enforcement's favorite ringtone for like 8 months.
That's
but
awesome.
It was because I said something that was true,
Right.
that needed to be said, because she was too busy pretending like we didn't have people organized in an organized fashion invading our city, which we all knew was happening. Mm-hmm. Those piles of debris, those box trucks coming in off the interstate, all of that was real. And in a meeting when I have gangbangers and people checking folks with the AK-47s in neighborhoods trying to see who belonged where, she accused me of basically making it up for attention. Mm-hmm. Attention in a closed meeting, by the way. And, I remember that day in May, hearing the glass break down the street from my house. I remember my own grandparents were about to go out to eat. And I had to literally call them because they had no idea the civil unrest was happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then to get on a Zoom call, and I remember my husband, Hugo, saying, don't take any crap from her today. Boy, didn't. But that's really what got me into the national spotlight with Fox and others, you know, because here's a Democrat fighting with another Democrat.
Right.
And sadly, you know, as we've seen my party pivot further left and go trying to out crazy each other, you know, I'm basically like the last man standing right now in the Democratic Party, trying to remind people, as you said, what our real democratic values are, what our goals should be, which is to be supportive, be helpful, and also not be criminal, you know, enablers. And it's because of that and that unwillingness to bend to what everyone else wants to talk about and actually focusing on what people need to talk about, that we're here today. Once again, having a very honest conversation when it comes to immigration and migrants and asylum seekers about what's right and what's wrong. You know, I've called out both Democrats and Republicans for failing for 40 years since Ronald Reagan granted amnesty to actually get their house in order, manipulating it for both of their constituencies. You know, Republicans doing it for the benefit of certain businesses who like hiring undocumented workers, and Democrats for doing it for their own messianic complexes and the industrial not-for-profit complex that they like to pay into to maintain all this. But here we are now in this moment saying, look, fix the front door and stop allowing everybody, as we saw, especially under the last 4 years. You know, I represent immigrants, I represent undocumented, and watching millions leapfrog over all of them that have been here for decades by manipulating asylum was just more than I could live with.
You know,
more than my
I'm
residents.
sorry to, do you know what would be helpful? Explain, like, to the audience who your community is, right? The demographics and kind of the area, because we have mostly this is national, but we have, you know, a lot of Illinois folks. So explain your neighborhood and your constituents.
So the district that I represent, the 15th ward, is on the southwest side of the city of Chicago, predominantly a Latino district. It has actually changed under 3 different remaps I've been a part of. It went from 72% African American to 67% Latino to 61% Latino, African American, and Caucasian with some Asian in there. So I represent a pretty diverse group. I also represent some historic neighborhoods like West Englewood and Back of the Yards in Canaryville. The stockyards, which many of your watchers may know from like the Jungle, where, you know, it's all the famous meat packing and stuff like that. You know, that's my neck of the woods. But I also represent communities that are either longtime Americans, multi-generational, first time Americans, undocumented individuals, African Americans who've been here since the second migration from the South. You know, all kinds of folks are in this ward. But, you know, that being said, all of them want safe neighborhoods.
Yeah.
All of them want to live in communities where their kids can grow up, where their seniors can sit on the front porch, and where maybe they could find a job or come to and from home from work without having to look over their shoulders. And that has become increasingly more difficult as our new arrivals, as Mayor Johnson likes to call them, infiltrate our neighborhoods. And, you know, by and large, most of them are okay, but there are some that have brought some very bad habits with them. Some that are dealing drugs, involved in human trafficking, and the worst of the worst that people want action on. And that's why we're fighting right now and supporting what Donald Trump and Tom Homan are doing to get those specific individuals, those most dangerous in that segment of the population, out. We should not be sanctuary for them. We should not give them cover to be here.
To stay on that theme, I saw you post, because there's an issue here with the safety, obviously. Terry and I have reported exclusively on FOIA findings about the crime that's been imported in these facilities, then once they get to these apartments and so forth, and when they get in the neighborhoods. Before the show, we were all talking about the graffiti that they're showing that their turf is now and so forth. But I saw you post on X something that some people might not know about that you could fill us in about, is the shot spotter thing, where Brandon Johnson got rid of it, and you were posting on that about two people that got shot on the south side. Can you tell us about that? Because I've just mentioned, they're importing crime, and he's also now making it less safe because they're moving shot spotter.
And is that racist too, to have a shot spotter? So go ahead.
So the term ShotSpotter refers to gunshot detection technology that we've had in the city of Chicago for nearly 10 years. It costs roughly $10 million, but basically can triangulate when a gunshot goes off within 3 to 5 feet where a shooting has happened. And as we've seen in nearly a dozen police districts, oftentimes that is the only way we know when a shooting has happened, let alone whether or not there's somebody who may be on the ground bleeding to death because they've been shot themselves. We know that 911 calls are on the decline, so having technology to help us identify when a shooting goes off and where it happened has been instrumental in saving lives. We had nearly 1,000 people last year who survived their gunshot wound because police arrived with no corresponding 911 call. 1,000 people in a city where last year, up until the technology went offline, we had recovered on the streets of the city of Chicago 246,000 bullet casings.
Wow.
246,000.
Wow.
That's enough to kill off 10% of the population with a gunshot to the head. And since then, the mayor has basically pushed to end that technology without a replacement and come up with a very strange and Byzantine bid process to replace it. But basically, it was because he said that the technology was racist, as you alluded to, Terry, that it was disproportionately impacting his favorite quote unquote black and brown communities, over policing areas because of the gunshots, and building mistrust in communities when resources could otherwise be spent on reducing crime.
Ray, why does he I mean, it makes no sense, right? So what is it? Do you know? I mean, I don't know if you know the answer, but what's his motivation to do that? Because it helps his people.
Well, I think what we have to remember is that the mayor simply does not care about catching criminals. Flat out.
Yeah, he's importing criminals.
Right.
Well, and now, as we've seen, especially as of late, a lot of these individuals, and as your FOIAs point out, like the Standard Club downtown, where you had 22 pages of
crazy.
police activity
Yep.
going on there, which was incredible, by the way. In their mind, in their socialist agenda, you just simply don't acknowledge what's going on.
Yeah.
If I don't talk about it, it's not happening. And we've seen this kind of mentality take a stronger hold in the Democratic Party, both at the local, state, and federal levels. And I think that's, partly what contributed to so many Democratic individuals bolting the party, leaving Kamala Harris behind, and going to vote for Donald Trump, because there are kitchen table issues, as we call them, that people were dealing with. And, our top of the ticket candidates were like, don't worry about that. We're going to talk about electric vehicle stations and tampons in boys' bathrooms and all this other stuff that
I like
doesn't affect 99.9% of the population.
Yeah,
I
I'd like your opinion
everything
on this, and it's not a Democrat or Republican thing, right? There's outside influences, and I've only been in this for a few years, right? I got in because of the forced masking and the porn, all the crazy stuff. But it seems like there's all this crazy outside influences affecting Democrat and Republicans in trying to hurt America or separate our children,
Special
or all these
interest.
illegals come in, turn your back, or ShotSpotter, which is there's all these crazy things that are going on, and they seem intertwined. And there's some sort of outside influence or something that's affecting both parties. And it's what is your view on that?
There's a moral rot in this country, and I think we've lost our way. To be perfectly honest with you, we're afraid of two words in particular: values, and the F word, family. Because everything we seem to see out of government as of maybe the last 5 years, especially, all seeks to undermine some of the most basic concepts of society that we've all grown up with. And even if society evolves, as in the case of my case, for example, right? I'm a married gay man. I know what a family is. I know what values are, whatever. That definition has changed wildly over the last 20 years. But even in the last 5, I'm seeing where now the LGBT universe now considers lesbians and gays now to be the enemy of trans.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this continuous evolution where we're constantly having to fight to find new ways, because people are finding new ways to divide themselves or to to corrupt the idea of what it means to be community, or to change the narrative on what it means to be a neighborhood.
Yeah, I have lots of gay
or
friends.
sovereignty for that matter.
I have lots of gay friends. I work with Gays Against Groomers, and so like, say if yourself say, I don't want porn and drag queens in the children's schools, or reading like in our library, pride books to 2-year-old babies. It's like, and so if they say they don't think that's appropriate, they're attacked for being anti-gay, and they're gay. It just makes no sense.
I mean, like, for example, look, I'm a Catholic school kid. I'm a Catholic school kid my whole life. You know, as I watch like some of Chicago public schools talk about sexuality and things at like 2nd and 3rd grade, it blows my mind, because I don't think I had a sex ed class until I was in 6th grade. And that was, the Catholic version of sex ed.
Right.
I wasn't learning how to do oral sex in a coloring book like you see in some of these things right now. But it's a weird corruptibility that's going on right now.
I didn't have
that
sex
I think
ed.
needs to be addressed.
I didn't have sex ed until I became an altar boy. Bad joke. Our Lady of Loretta.
We're gonna turn this into turns out I went to Catholic school too. We're gonna turn this podcast into a.
Altar boys were the worst too, by the way.
I was an altar boy too, and you know what? Not a bad experience. I don't want to get in.
I was joking. It was a
that
bad
conversation.
Joke.
So I would move over for when the lightning bolt comes through the studio and strikes Terry dead.
Yeah, I know. He says I try to stay away from him sometimes. So you are obviously. First of all, I applaud you for talking about this issue of values and family. You are aware that has seemed to be an anathema subject in your party of late. Is this something that you feel like you can bring this conversation? You can bring back to, the mainstream of the Democrat platform. And furthermore, and I don't want you to out your party or anything, but has there been a concerted effort to kind of just push that conversation aside to bring other, maybe the LGBTQ thing to the forefront or other issues? And can you talk about that and just give us some insight into the Democrat platform, and if you think it's changing because you're able to talk about these issues?
I'll say from my perspective, and that is
Sure.
this, that whether it's coordinated or not, it's definitely happening. That we are losing touch with our base, our traditional base, and I warned about that in this last presidential election numerous times, when you saw the Democratic Party choose to side with Palestinian terrorists over our Israeli allies following October 7th. I said this: when you see our narrative support some of the hyper self-victimized trans advocates who are routinely disparaging gays and lesbians and other individuals, just for the sake of being able to spew hate and animosity from a point of victimhood. I think all of these values and things are in part happening within the party because the party itself knows that its base is shrinking. And rather than focus on the ability to get back to the center and lead with conviction from the middle, they are going after farther left, socialist, borderline communist constituencies who are not necessarily our friends, but are our friend in the moment, who manipulate and co-opt our messaging and our apparatus for their own abilities, a la Bernie Sanders, who's only a Democrat when he needs to get into a primary and then flips on us immediately after. And I believe that there's a certain segment within the political class that thinks that, they have to veer so far to the extreme left just to make it through an election that they forget where the middle was to begin with. And I will say this too: our Democratic voters now have become so turned off, having ran for Congress. I could tell you, it's not easy going against just straight Democratic voters, because oftentimes, as we know, in a primary, it's always the most committed and usually the most extreme that stay for a primary, whether Republican or Democrat.
Well, they'll
But when
get
you
the
come
most
to a
support from the
general,
party, right?
when
They'll-
you get to the general election, you have individuals who then complain, well, why are these our only options? And it's like, well, you can't skip the first round and go right to the final round without knowing why you wound up with who you have in the final round.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of issues, but I think none of them are easily rectifiable unless you're willing to invest time, energy, and be willing to put yourself out there in a way that isn't always easy for most people, particularly in this generation of politicians, but hence why I'm here.
Yeah. So just, all the posts about you are extremely positive. Han Solo says, damn, Ray's on point. Dude needs to change parties.
yeah. Well,
I just had to share that with you.
Well, but you know what? To be honest, I hear that all the time, and the sad reality is I shouldn't have to.
Yes, right.
Because the
right.
Democratic Party used to be sane.
Right.
It used to have common
Right.
sense.
well, Raymond, you
There
sound
used
like
to be a middle that people were fine
Right,
with,
right.
operating from, and we've gotten away from that.
Well, Raymond, you sound like a bridge builder, to be quite honest. And yeah, I wouldn't advocate for you leaving your party at all.
Yeah.
I would ask you though. I mean, you do sound like a bridge builder. You sound completely reasonable. Do you believe that in this time that you have the ability to do that at a higher level? I mean, I think you do. I'm a big fan, but I would love to hear what you think.
Well, I would say clearly being willing to at least open a door and see who walks in is something that I'm known for. Obviously, meeting Terry when we were talking with Tom Homan is a perfect example of being able to come across the aisle or even across the nation for that matter to have conversations to see what we could do to try to show people a different path. Because I think honestly, whether it's in Chicago or any other city in this great nation of ours, people are tired of everyone just pointing the fingers at each other, screaming and hollering. I mean, I was watching some of these confirmation hearings, and it's a bad joke at this point.
It is.
Yeah,
It's like all the
theater.
opportunities to speak on the topic,
Right.
especially like, for example, with RFK Jr. Talking about the health of our nation, and everyone's more concerned about what, onesies?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw
From
that.
Children's Health Defense. I know it's ridiculous.
There's another thing that you mentioned the Tom Holman thing. So there was like 3 meetings. Ray was one of the 3 meetings, and other people are agreement and want to come out and support. Ray's the only guy that had courage to openly come out right now. There's others that support, but they're not coming out yet. You were the only one that openly came out to, in support of your opinion. I hope the others will eventually come out, but I just wanted to, mention that as well.
And let's not forget that, that picture went like viral immediately once we posted it, me and him just meeting, didn't even have to say what we were talking about, just meeting. And I remember, people in the mayor and governor's orbit and all of their political lackeys were, up in arms and spewing their vitriol, how could I, all this, I'm a sellout, blah, blah, blah. And now look at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just always ahead of the curve. I can't help it.
Yeah.
But, hopefully that gives us some hope.
Yeah.
What's coming.
You could talk about now, Ray, is the amendment, right? And I remember we talked about this, and you wanted to make it easy for people in your party to agree with you to make amendments to the Welcome City ordinance, right? And go after the hardcore illegal criminals. And I remember you talking about, purposely didn't put, I think it was spousal abuse. Not that that's not a bad thing, nor you agree it's a bad thing, is to make it very easy to go after the real bad people, talk about that. And they still didn't, embrace your request.
Well, that's exactly what that clip that you started this segment talked about, which was in the middle of January at our regular city council meeting. One of my colleagues, Alderman Silvana Tabares, joined me in trying to move forward with an amendment to our sanctuary laws, our welcoming city ordinance, not stripping it completely, contrary to everyone's public opinion,
Right.
but simply making one little tweak that was in the law for decades until it was removed by the great Lori Lightfoot. And that was that police
That's
officers.
sarcasm.
Did you catch that?
Yeah.
I mean, I could say it again if I need to, but that's all right. But it would allow police officers to work with our federal partners if they arrested or caught someone that was convicted of certain criminal activities. And there was 4 that we were discussing in particular. Anyone that was arrested or convicted of drug-related crimes, gang-related crimes, prostitution and human trafficking, or sex crimes involving minors. So if you're a pimp, drug dealer, or some child sexual deviant, sorry, adios, return to sender.
Yeah.
And 39 members of the city council could not bring themselves to support that. Some of my socialist colleagues, some that you have met when giving testimony and seen live in action in the council chamber, asked me afterwards if I was comfortable sacrificing the 2 or 3% that are bad within the overall migrant immigrant population in exchange for protecting the 98% that are here basically minding their own business. And without skipping a beat, I said, of course, who wouldn't be? And they're like, well, we don't support that. I'm just like, okay, you support the criminals because that's what you're telling me.
Wow.
And, you know, they could talk about due process. They could talk about constitutional rights. They could talk about whatever they want to talk about. All I know is that if you have an opportunity to remove a dangerous threat, you take it. It is not rocket science.
Right.
And it actually helps not only our communities, but helps our police officers because then they feel like their work matters too, because our officers catch these individuals, know that we have a tool and we simply cannot use it because of our political sympathies to protect everyone, including the bad guys.
Yeah, we're working on rolling out the referendums, right? We talked about the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. And, hopefully we'll be able to get them on the 2026 election, but probably, and you know this better than I, Chicago will find a way to keep it out. Illinois will find a way to keep it out. But I think that it's not a black, white, Democrat, Republican. I think we could get so many signatures, even if they block it, we could weaponize these signatures, i.e. in the city of Chicago, when we get people from the communities where the Chewy Garcias or these radicals are, and say, hey, would you support us over these criminal illegals that are bringing violence, and sign this? And if they don't sign it, hopefully we could use it to try to get some normal Democrats or Republicans, either or, to say, hey, we support the community. We don't want these bad people in our community. And if they don't support it and sign it, they're basically betraying their own people. That's my hope of this.
Well, what I think we've seen is a couple things in the first nine and a half days, 10 days. Are we at 10 days yet?
Yeah.
I don't even know if we've hit the 10 day.
Yeah.
I know we haven't hit the 2 week mark yet. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's been a long 9 days.
Yeah.
You've been very active on X.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to get to, which is we've seen the fear mongering machine in full effect, trying to sideline what Donald Trump and Tom Homan are doing, which is they're not doing raids on neighborhoods. They're not going after everybody.
Secret Service story.
Hamlin
Secret
School.
Service story.
Hamlin.
Right.
Grammar
Well, and that's, Hamline, which is in back of the
Hamline.
yard, which is a neighborhood which is near to my ward and one of the communities that I actually represent. The entire day, starting with the Secret Service showing up to investigate a threat, which, by the way, for most Americans, just to remind you, that is their job against the President of the United States.
Right.
Went there, presented a card, told everyone, we're here to investigate. We just want to let you know the blah, blah. In that 30-minute interaction, it went from being a Secret Service handing a business card that said Secret Service to, oh my God, ICE is here in the community trying to do a raid and snatch your children out of the school.
And the governor and the mayor said it too.
Well, and before CPS could confirm it, the principal had already called the local political whack jobs, advocates, and news media,
Teachers Union,
as well as the Teachers Union president, who was all on hand for the press conference to decry Trump and ICE and Homan and blah, 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 all before the CEO of public schools could even verify that any of this had happened. And then they ran that story. Every politician, from the governor, the mayor, the members of Congress, half a dozen members of the city council, and anyone who has a stationery with their name on it, basically put out statements slamming the administration for what they were doing, until about 6 hours later when it was learned, oops, it actually wasn't ICE.
Yeah.
Not one retraction, not one apology to the neighborhood. And yet, even now, that weekend, that's when Tom Homan arrived with the acting head of the Department of Justice
Right.
and 95% of the alphabet departments of the federal government, taking away child sexual predators, taking away murderers, taking away everyone in a very strategic, surgical manner. And what did the local media want to talk about? Hamline, which had already been debunked.
Yeah, Ray, and I texted you right away because as soon as I saw that story, and we were there when Tom Holman talked. Tom said, "Hey, I'd rather have go and pick these guys up at Cook County Jail and send one agent to go pick a guy and handcuff him."
Yeah.
And he goes, "They're these people that say they don't want to do this, it's counterintuitive. So I got to go get the bad guy in his neighborhood, put us at risk, put them at risk. Oh, and also maybe arrest people that are there illegally that might not have been on our radar because they're not doing this." So I just sat there and I saw that story. I still sent it to you. I'm like, you know what? I don't think Tom Holman is this stupid that he's going to send 2 ICE agents to knock on a grammar school door. I just knew. It didn't make sense. And then they purposely did this. And then I don't know if you saw me and Ben Berquam, confronted Pritzker at his press conference with Johnson. Did you see that? The guys are they're such hypocrites, and they criticize Trump and Holman as being fear-mongered.
Yeah.
What did they do with those poor
just
kids?
fear-mongered.
The whole city was scared.
Yeah.
Yep. And they have maintained that level and that perception, which is why I quite literally have been doing 3 or 4 interviews a day to try to beat back this narrative and explain simply that the administration is going after dangerous criminals, that these are not community-wide raids, that it's very strategic, and that if you're worried about your relatives or anybody else, then you should tell your local officials that they should have cooperated or still change their tune and cooperate so you can reduce the collateral captures like we just saw the other day where a father who was in Bridgeview, I think, was undocumented, been here 30 years. Okay.
30 years,
whatever. But his son, also presumably undocumented, known gangbanger, wanted on weapons charges and attempted murder. And all the media is running with, why is this poor father taken from his family? And you know what? My heart goes out to this individual. I'm sure he was a great guy, but immigration was there for your kid.
Yeah.
Immigration was there because your son tried to kill someone in the United States. This is exactly what we've been talking about. And if the local law enforcement had been able to turn him over when they had him, then that father probably still be here right now.
And I saw your post saying, I told you, this is why I put the amendment forward. I told you this kind of thing would happen. And I want to back up for a second.
And let me just say one thing about that too, Paul, because even though I've said it, you said it, we said it, Tom Holman said it, this is exactly the photo op and the headlines that the mayor, the socialists, and all the hyper-progressive white folks from the north side of the city of Chicago and other places
all over the place,
want.
I'm glad you said that.
This is what they want. Because what they would readily acknowledge is that, well, ICE can already go into neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Well, no kidding.
Yeah.
But that's what we're trying to stop. And unless you're trying to admit that you want ICE agents and tactical teams doing missions in your neighborhoods, then you're really talking out of both ends here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're not trying to protect the long-term undocumented who you quote unquote say are the anchors of our community.
Right.
You're putting everyone on the table.
Right. Right.
When you can very easily slim down the menu. So
I wanted to I wanted to bring up something that you and I talked about in our last interview. I think it's very important, and I don't want to lose sight of this. Incentives. We don't have to speculate here about why this might be beneficial. You in our last interview, you talked about Mayor Johnson and how his history of advocacy for the teachers union, and you had mentioned how more kids being put into these schools means more money. But I want you to reiterate that part and kind of the details of that. But it's not just that, right, Alderman Lopez, because the city of Chicago has spent $600 million plus. The state over $1 billion, right? Can you talk about how this crisis that is manufactured brings in money that the city can spend? And can you just elaborate on that and kind of go back to our conversation about how this helps the teachers union in the sense that money comes in?
Well, let's start with CTU and
Okay.
and Chicago Public Schools. In the city of Chicago, schools get paid based on a per pupil formula. So as we saw 57,000 migrant asylum seekers come to the city of Chicago, we saw roughly 13,000 school-age children now being enrolled in various schools throughout the city of Chicago. And oftentimes when people wonder where these individuals were settled or being sent to, they might have been at a shelter downtown or a shelter in one neighborhood, but they were always being shuttled somewhere. And oftentimes they were being shuttled into some of the under-enrolled schools in the African American community, schools that were very close to being on the chopping block the moment the school closure moratorium would have been lifted. Now, these schools in African American communities don't have Spanish language speakers, don't have Venezuelan or any kind of Latino cultural awareness or activities, and yet these children were being dropped there. And then not only put in those schools to help boost their numbers and therefore boost their budgets, they were also then being enrolled in IEPs, individual education plans, which they usually do for students who have some sort of mental or physical disability, simply because the students themselves did not speak English.
Right.
That means that their instructional value was actually lowered. And that also required more money to be given to the school, because in Illinois and in Chicago, if you have one of these individual education plans, that means you're more than likely also supposed to have an assistant to be in the classroom with you. So if you have 10 individuals in a classroom who have these IEPs and the school marks them down as needing assistance, now you get to hire and have funding for 10 new assistants to help you with those individual students.
And they're more expensive, right? Because of the
And they're all
classification.
CTU Chicago Teachers Union members. So in the short term, there's a benefit for them. But I also want to get back to the fact that you talked about the billion plus that was spent by the state and county and others in 2023, and the 624 million that we spent out of the city of Chicago in 2024. It would be nice to say that money was coming in to help them. But the sad reality is that money was being redirected for these purposes. Because as we saw last year, oftentimes we're barely getting 10% of what we spent reimbursed by the federal government under the Biden-Harris administration. I'm pretty sure I know what that reimbursement's going to be under the Trump administration, which is exactly what we warned the mayor and everyone about. So when I saw his press conference the other day extolling the anger and vitriol that he had for the executive orders limiting funding out the door. Oh, we're shocked, we're dismayed. We didn't know. Who would have guessed? Well, Stevie Wonder could have seen that was coming in November. But what we do know is this and you've heard this and we've seen this at city council meetings. It's been played. You've got the Flip Chicago Red, you've got all kinds of constituents, black, white, brown, you name it, who come down and say, stop spending our money on these individuals. Because think about it, 59,000 people, you spent $600 million on them. That's a lot of money.
That's crazy.
To put things in perspective, I represent in my district $54,000, and the amount of money that I get to do infrastructure improvement in my ward is $1.5 million. So they've got me outspent,
Right.
Wow.
250 to 1. And that's for
crazy.
Chicago taxpayers. But we've seen where money just magically was reassigned, reappropriated, and spent on other executive branch priorities. And it's interesting because as I listen to the mayor of the city of Chicago lament the executive of the federal government change spending priorities in direct contradiction to the will of the legislative branch, I can't help but think that, wow, you're just like, the socialist version of Trump in the city of Chicago, because you do exactly the same thing that he's trying to do. Very different value set, but you use all the same tactics, and yet it's bad for him, but good for you. So maybe that's why they don't like each other.
Hey, you know what, Ray? I don't think I ever shared this with you. Did I tell you a whistleblower reached out to me that was working the shelters? Did I ever mention that to you or no?
I think so.
Yeah, $360,000. I got his check stub. I also he took,
Oh, yeah.
he took, and then so the way it worked is his pyramid. He said, he knew it. There's 27 shelters, 360. Then he had two project managers that worked the 12-hour shifts at 275, two operations people at 200,000. Then he talked about the security guards. And I got the woman from the city of Chicago. The email, he took track. He goes, the security guards weren't showing up. He's got an Excel spreadsheet. He sent it to her trying to be conscious of the money. She said, that's not our mission. Not our mission.
Yep.
And then the food, half the food was being thrown out. He kept track of the water bottles. And it's like crazy. And I'll share this with you, as well as the woman from the city of Chicago who said, don't worry about it. And he was trying to, this guy. Oh, and then another thing is he had to eventually say that he lived in the city of Chicago because people were finding out how much money they made. So he had to pretend he lived there. And he said all of them would fly into Chicago. They'd get a car, all of them, when they only needed one to share. And that's something that is important. I think that, I'll make sure I'll give that to you, all that information.
The lowest paid person from the original contract signed by Lori Lightfoot and then kept in place by Mayor Johnson was the janitor at a shelter who made $167 an hour.
It's crazy.
The lowest paid person.
Yep. You know what the guy said to me? So he was there in 2021. He started. Then they lowered him from 360 to 330 or something like that. But he said the justification, it was his emergency, right? They're not working full time. And so this is something, they had to say, yes, we worked a lot of hours, but we still made a lot of money. And he got fed up with he's in a different country now. And I got all these emails and contacts I'll share with you. I think you could do more with it than I got it sitting on my computer.
And that was something that we were trying to get to the heart of the moment the first migrants arrived, and that when Lori Lightfoot took us into the daycare business of shelters, and dealing with migrants, and even trying to explain that to the Johnson administration when he took over, that we needed to address this issue because we knew we were being fleeced at every turn, and no one wanted to ever talk about it. Interestingly enough, Lori Lightfoot said that the contracts awarded came with non-disclosure agreements, which meant that they couldn't discuss it with city council.
Of course.
Which is interesting that the folks that have to pay the bills can't ask questions. And many of my colleagues were okay with that because they didn't want to know the details. And then we also seen where Brandon Johnson didn't know how to stop the contract and then automatically allowed it to renew, even though we knew that there were no federal dollars coming to help support what was happening.
It's crazy.
And the only time that we actually saw any kind of schism between the city and the state was when the mayor was trying with his chief of staff and his deputy mayor for immigrant and refugee rights, trying to put 1,800 migrant families on a toxic brownfield in the Brighton Park community on the southwest side. And he was going to use state money to just start doing it. And then the governor jumped in and said, oh, stop. I don't want to be liable for this catastrophe that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because we figured that they were going to be the next Camp Lejeune commercial.
Yeah.
If you were in a migrant shelter.
Yeah.
By the way, we got a bunch of commenters saying they need a job. They'd like to go work for that kind of money.
Hey, so we have we got like three official 3 minutes because we have to, now that we're on Patriot TV, I got to stay to 52 minutes, whatever. Yeah. I got one personal self-interest, and I know you can't do anything even though you're in the city of Chicago because there's so much control. So I'm also a member of the Joint Civic Committee of Italian Americans. Are you familiar with that?
I am. I got an award from them for being a supporting member this year.
Oh, you did? That's what I was going to ask you. And we got some of my
especially because I'm Italian too,
Are you? Oh, okay. So we have some of my friends that are actually senior real members. Really I'm not an active member. And are we ever gonna get our statue back? I know you have no influence over that. I understand that, but it's kind of ironic. Even in our suburb here, in our library and stuff, they don't even honor. They're all diverse and inclusive, right? So these radical leftists running our library don't acknowledge Columbus Day, but they acknowledge everything else: Pride Month, Hispanic Month, Black Month, this and that. And then we don't even have Italian Pride Month to acknowledge the things that the Italians did because they're so tied up about the indigenous people. Before they would have their meetings, they would do the Indigenous People Pledge, not even do the Pledge of Allegiance. And it's like, we're probably never going to get our statues back. I know they're trying to
Well,
negotiate.
I will say you'll never get it out of this mayor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I bet you Mayor Lopez would help us.
But I do know that one day Christopher Columbus will come back to the city of Chicago.
Hey, there you go, Terry.
Thank you.
You could start a referendum for that.
Yes. Yeah. So
But especially when the mayor here is now trying to equate, migrants with indigenous people and colonizers and Civil War and who knows, Again, common sense would be great one of these days.
Yeah, amen. All I have is that I just want to again commend you. I think we need more representatives in government like yourself who are willing to be brave enough to speak out against some of your own party's foibles, and B, willing to reach across the aisle. I'm a huge fan, and I just thank you so much for talking to us and help us bringing attention to this immigration catastrophe.
Great job.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you, man. So thanks. No, that was awesome. Appreciate it.
Yep.
So now this will
keep it up too. Yeah.
So this will be our official cutoff with Mike. Mike, when you edit this for Patriot TV, so we got a couple personal things, not personal, local things we want to say. I want to say, not that you want to say.
Yeah.
So Mike, you could cut it off here for all the commercials and stuff that you're going to do for Patriot TV. I just want to bring to the attention my friends from DGTRO and Downers Grove Township Organization.
Keep them on.
No, yeah, Downers Grove Township Organization. I ran some FOIA requests, and I know my Republicans hate me because I call them out. Their corruption, right? And we heard that the Downers Grove Township Assessor, Greg Boltz, was using his emails for personal political aspects of
political.
Yeah, political things, right? So I ran a FOIA request of the Downers Grove Township clerk. Her name is Lorraine the Grim Reaper Grimsley. and I
don't know if that's the pronunciation.
I said, can you give me the last 10 months of Greg Boltz's emails and Anthony Pacelli's emails and see if there's any keyword searches for York Assessor or just York for York Township? Because we heard there's some communications. I don't know if there was or not, right? So Lorraine the Grim Reaper Grimsley comes back and says, oh, no, there's nothing came up, zero, nothing. I'm like, really? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, how could these assessors not communicate over a year? Right. Just common sense would have you, right? So I'm thinking, well, how could I get to the bottom of this? Because she's friends with Greg Boltz. She used to rent his house out. So I'm like, oh, wow, I'm going to FOIA York Township. And I said, York Township, could you do a search under your township emails for Gregory Boltz, the Downers Grove Township Assessor? The guy gets back to me, the clerk, the assessor goes, it's so burdensome. There's so many emails. I don't have to honor this because it will take too much time and effort for me to respond based on the FOIA guidelines. Then I go back to the guy, go, okay, let me shorten it and make it lessen the burdensome on you. And I said, why don't you go back to the last email and go 10 days before that? And boom, 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 boom. I got like 3 or 4 emails, right? So she lied to me. And so I'm just letting people know there's elections. Huh?
She lied about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I reached out to the Attorney General today, and I copied her just to be a Terry Newsom smartass to let her know I'm like, boop, boop, boop. I'm doing what the Three Stooges poke in the eye. And so when I spoke to the Assistant Attorney General, called me back, and he said, well, if what you're telling me is true, they definitely violated it. So I shared everything with them late today. And Lorraine, the Grim Reaper Grimsley, is going to have to address to say, hey, I don't know why I couldn't find anything because York Township's got like tons of them. So I just wanted to bring that up because I'm trying to get back at these people who came after me and my family, and I'm going to hold them accountable. I'm going to hold them accountable.
Well, Terry, I would say that, there's been some recent shakeups, let's say, in the Illinois GOP, right? Mm-hmm. And it seems to be a little drama going on in different areas. Mm-hmm. But also, I think your and I experience has been of late that there's maybe a little more willingness to engage, collaborate. Yeah. And I would suggest that things are changing. And I would suggest any Republicans out there that, we need to be less combative, and you guys need to reach out a little bit more, because our influence is not getting less.
Nope, it's getting more.
And I'm running for office, and I have an event February 10th at Emmett's in Downers Grove.
Come and support Paul. He's going to fight for parents' rights and everything. And he's going to fight for everybody's rights, right? So just because we're against porn and oral sex and just Nancy stuff in the kids' school doesn't mean he's against gay. We just had a gay person out here who agrees with us.
I just want to say, to the Republicans out there that have been kind of pushing us off and who blackballed us from our own local organization, how many of you have had an hour-long conversation with a gay Democrat? I mean, I am not anti-LGBTQ.
Say that to the Democrats that are after you.
Yeah, and that's my other thing. I was going to say that. On the other side, what Democrats in our local area are reaching across the aisle and talking to Republicans. So I think I've proven, along with Terry, who everybody thinks is some hateful bigot, that we are willing to talk to anybody. We're willing to talk to anybody. So, and I will say, I want to say this to the Republicans out there who have been reaching out to me, who have been helping me out, who have been backing my campaign. Appreciate it, and I will continue to work with you and collaborate with you. But I'm extending that to other Republicans in the party, because you know what? You don't have the luxury anymore of not working with us. You should probably just come to the table. It's already happening with some of your other people. So
if not, I will crush you. I'll crush you.
Again, we're not.
Remember the kids.
There's not less people talking to us or watching us.
Yeah.
So. Obviously Terry can get people to sit down and have a conversation. So,
tell them about the New York Times today.
New York Times did
an interview with me from New York.
Do you want to win?
Yeah.
Do you want to win? Do you want to win? So, I mean, let's put aside the bullshit.
Yeah. So thank you guys, and you can see us on the weekends as well on Patriot TV. They're going to rerun this. We got to do 2 shows a week soon, and then if those of you who are watching us, please watch us on Rumble. Just search Behind Enemy Lines. We're the #1 Behind Enemy Lines on Rumble, because that's the place where we really need to rock our numbers.
Join us in the bunker.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.